When State first released the 4130 All-Road, there was no doubt in my mind it'd be a popular bike. With a steel frame, decent tire clearance, through axles, and a plethora of mounting locations, all for $900, it looked to be a hard-to-beat value bike. I had seen some in the wild, but it wasn't until a few months ago that I got to try one for myself. I've been putting it to the test with their carbon monster fork in both flat and drop bar form ever since, and in this video, I'm going to tell you the good and the bad and who this bike is for, so let's get into it. The 4130 comes in a few different flavors, flat or drop bar, and wheels coming in 700C or 650B, also known as 27.5. It's available in 4 sizes from extra small up to a large. While I typically ride a large, at 5'11", State's recommended rider height put me squarely on a medium. But taking a look at the geometry chart and comparing it to bikes I ride regularly, the large looked like a much better fit for both the flat and drop bar options. So in the end, State ended up sending me the most mountain bikey combo you can get with XC style 27.5 by 2.1 inch tires and flat bars all on a large frame. The bike has a 575mm effective top tube, 385 reach, and a decently tall 621.5 stack, all on that size large frame. It's a fit that's clearly more oriented to drop bars and is one reason I decided to size up. The medium would have been on the smaller side with drops, but would have felt super short and really small with flat bars. So if you're going to want to run flat bars, I'd take a close look at the sizing chart and consider sizing up. On the more ride-focused side of the geometry, the bike actually has different head tube and seat tube angles depending on the size. The extra small has a 70.5 degree head tube, while the large is a full degree steeper at 71.5. It's more exaggerated on the seat tube, with the extra small at 75 degrees and the large slackened out to 73. No matter the size, you get 75 mils of bottom bracket drop and a fairly long for a gravel bike 450 mil chainstay, both of which give you a more stable ride. Moving on to the components, you're going to find that everything is State branded, which is part of the reason they're able to keep the cost so low. The 1x11 drivetrain has been confirmed to be made by Sensa, and while not super high-end, it's got a decently wide range, a clutch, and has proven to be generally reliable. It still has a kind of entry-level feel to it, meaning it shifts reliably, but it's not super fast or ultra smooth. If I had to compare it to Shimano or SRAM offerings, it feels a step below Dior or maybe NX in terms of performance. I didn't use the stock drivetrain when switching to drop bars, mainly because I needed to review Wheeltop's GEX wireless drivetrain, but if you're someone who wants to swap between flats and drops, you only need the controls as the derailleur will work with both. The stock flat bars are super narrow, but honestly they felt right at place with the bike's geometry. When I first got it, I thought I'd want to swap those out first thing, but I ended up really enjoying the ride feel that I got from them. The grips are a little bit of a different story though. They're some sort of cheap silicone grips that got really slippery when I got sweaty, and they just weren't that comfortable overall. The brakes are hydraulic with 2-piston calipers, and they work well on paved and dirt roads. But if you're going to want to hit more double and single track trails, you may not be quite as happy with them. They did okay for me, but I think long term I would want to swap them out, or at the very least put a larger rotor on the front. The wheels are also State branded and gave me no issues, including with tubeless setup despite the 27.5 tires not being tubeless ready. I had a lot of comments and messages from people saying they had issues with broken spokes and rims going all wonky, but I'm a heavier rider and I rode it just a little bit outside of its intended use case, and they're still running as true as when I unpacked the bike. The final thing I'll mention is the carbon monster fork I upgraded. I wasn't sure if they'd send it separately or include the original steel fork in the box, but the bike comes 95% assembled, including any upgrades you make when you're ordering. So while I didn't end up getting to try the steel fork, I still think I'd actually recommend upgrading to this carbon fork for a couple of reasons. First is for weight, because this bike isn't exactly light, coming in at nearly 28 pounds in a large. The carbon fork knocks a couple of pounds off that number, something you'll definitely notice on long rides. And if you're worried it does that by losing some utility, it's still got 3-pack and rack and fender mounts, so you can do what you want with it. The fork also has a nice ride feel to it when things get bumpy, taking the edge off small vibrations, but maintaining enough stiffness to not get wonky under hard braking. The final reason I'll mention is because the V2 of this fork has a flip chip on the axle. That means you can change it around depending on if you're running 27.5 or 700C tires, or if you just want a faster or slower steering feel. As someone who likes to tinker and change things up, it's a really cool feature I would definitely use. Speaking of versatility, the Allroad does a great job of being adaptable to your use case. The first obvious indicator of that is that they offer it in flat or drop bar and with 2 different wheel sizes. When I think back on all of my favorite bikes that I've ever owned or ridden, those are features I find on most of them. In the case of the 4130, you could have 2 distinctly different bikes with only a few changes. For gravel racing, road riding, and generally smoother terrain, you could run drop bars with some narrower 700C gravel tires. For more adventurous riding on trails, double track, and rough roads, you could simply swap out the wheels for a shorter but wider 27.5 tire. Throw on some alt bars like the Ritchie Coyotes or Jones H bar, and you've got an even more capable bike. That's exactly what I did at one point, and I found it to be an absolute blast for smooth, twisty, green single track. As I already mentioned, the frame and fork have mounts for racks or cages, and the frame itself has a spacious front triangle for a big bag. State did a good job of recognizing that a lot of people were going to use this as their entry into bike packing, and while it doesn't have as many mounts as other bikes, it's more than enough to get you out for a night or two. In general, the Allroad is a very capable bike. I rode it on paved and gravel roads, green and blue single track, and some sketchy, torn up double track. It handled all of that just fine, especially with 2.1-inch cross-country tires. I even got to ride it in a couple of inches of snow, and I was genuinely impressed with how stable and capable it was. But the more I ventured into mountain bike territory on those blues, the less confident I felt on the bike. As the descents got steep and the gravel turned more into rocks, the steep head tube angle and the low bottom bracket became very apparent. Whether it was nervous, twitchy steering or constant rock strikes, I just couldn't get comfortable in technical situations and had to resort to super slow riding or even getting off to walk. I wonder if some of that would go away if the head tube was 1 degree slacker just to match the extra small size. But in the end, this is an all-road bike, not a mountain bike, and for the vast majority of riders, I don't think it's going to matter at all. It does great at what it's designed for, and it feels comfortable and lively on roads, and even some single track if you enjoy how mountain bikes rode 20 years ago. The one thing I do wish was different to help out on the capability front is to increase the tire clearance a little to accept up to a 700 by 50 or a 29 by 2 inch tire. The front can actually go much bigger than that, at least with the carbon fork, but if the rear could take more than a 45, it'd open up a lot more tire options from the cross-country mountain bike world. To sum it all up, State's 4130 Allroad is a seriously impressive bike considering it's only $900. The frame is solid, 4130 chromoly, through axles, and all kinds of mounting locations. The axles might not sound like a big deal, but when it comes to future-proofing a bike, I think it's one of the most important things to look for. Quick release wheel sets are becoming increasingly harder to find, especially if you're wanting to upgrade and not just put on another budget wheel set. I think the geometry could use some slight tweaks for a little more confidence on rougher roads and trails and to clear bigger tires, but even as is, the frame is great. The components aren't anything to get excited about, but from my experience, they're above average at this price point. And given that the frame is a solid platform to build on, you can always upgrade as you want or need to. I don't think this bike is for everyone out there, but for the budget-conscious gravel rider, the mountain biker who wants to change things up now and then, or even the commuter who wants some extra cushion and compliance, the 4130 Allroad is heaven sent. I want to give a big thanks to Sate for sending this bike out for review. If you want to know more about it, check out the links in the description to find out more. And if you want to support me, share this video with your friends, like and comment down below. Let me know what you think of this bike or what some other options in this price range might be. And thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.